Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome to our first 2022 new show for the Money and You Show. I'm your host, Michelle Perkins, and I have the best guest today to start the year out with. Chris Hood is the head of business innovation and strategy for Google, and he is going to provide, I think, what we really need going forward in 2022, which is a great insight into innovation and strategy for all of us going into a time when everything around us is changing. I can't think of a time that I remember when so much is evolving and changing, and so it is a really exciting time. And our guest today is really going to help us to see some of the changes and ways to think about the world as it is now in this new state that it's transforming constantly into. So I'm going to introduce him quickly because I want to get into a conversation. Chris Hood is a digital strategist and technology entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience in online entertainment and marketing for TV, film, music, and video games. As the head of business innovation and strategy for Google, Chris engages with some of the top companies in the world to develop digital transformation strategies that grow business value. At Google, he also hosts the weekly business podcast, That Digital Show. Previously, Chris Hood worked as a director for Fox Broadcasting, where he developed storytelling technologies and innovated new mechanisms for viewers to engage with television content for shows like Glee, Gotham, Sleepy Hollow, and The X Factor, and American Idol. His work included the development of TV Everywhere products and interactive media platforms for streaming services. Chris also teaches in the Information Technology Department for Southern New Hampshire University and Colorado Technical University. Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
So pleased to have you here. Thank you so much. I just think opening the year with someone who is the kind of thinker you are is going to be really exciting for people. And I know the show is about money, but we're going to sort of transcend that today and really talk about how people make a living, how businesses grow and develop, and really change this idea of innovation. We've seen so much of it really forever, but especially it's kind of come to the forefront in the last couple of years. So I'd love to just hear almost a summarization, I guess, of maybe what you've learned or what companies and businesses should have learned from these last couple of years and going forward into 2022.
Hello. Yes, welcome. Thank you for the great introduction. And I think you're right. In your opening, you talked about it. It's change. Change is inevitable. And I think the one thing that we can take away from the last 2 years is that disruption can happen at any time. And it doesn't mean a pandemic every time, right? But it could be anything is going to ultimately disrupt you. That change that happens upon us at a moment's notice. And whether that is a life experience or something that changes within our own lives, family, business, work, pandemic, on and on and on, your industry, your business, your own personal finances, they will be disrupted at some point in time. It's inevitable. And if you go across the process of thinking about it, what your personal strategies are, or what your business strategies are, with that mindset that anything can be disrupted at any point in time and change is inevitable, then I think you're at least in the right starting place. You've got the right mindset to begin moving forward and being able to adapt to those changes as they happen. That is probably the number one first step for everyone who's listening.
Thank you. Yeah, and I wanted to say you thanked me for reading your bio. That was the tiny version of a very giant bio. You've got such an impressive background. So I just yeah, I'm really fascinated actually by with with the career you've had and the strategies you've developed. I love that you brought up mindset first. And then how does one go about being a strategist? I mean, was this natural to you? Did you develop certain skills and techniques? I'm really curious as people start doing their planning. I'm doing a planning workshop tomorrow with people. How do you think about strategy?
Yeah, that's a complicated
Yeah, I
question,
know.
but for me, it did come relatively naturally, but that doesn't mean that it's not a skill that can be learned. And the key in understanding strategy is having the ability to see the big picture. And when I'm talking about seeing the big picture, it's not just, what's going to happen this year. It's an understanding of what is going to happen over the course of the next 5 years and what various levels of impact could happen, and being humble enough to say, I have no idea what's going to happen. Like I just said, none of us predicted the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
What I can predict is that there's going to be some sort of disruption that will happen to everyone who's listening again at some point in time in your life. I know that.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. We've seen it. That's history. But understanding the big picture of things, of a business, of an industry, of your competitors, of money, of trends, of pop culture, and then add on to that a sprinkle of all of your favorite things in the world and news and reality and fiction. All of that comes together to influence us on strategies. And I remember having a conversation with a group of college students who wanted to get into a particular industry. And I went around and asked the whole room, what's your degree in? What are you currently studying? And they would go, and I'm an astronomer. And I built the correlation of how astronomy can help them in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really what we look for, is not just experience in, I have this experience for this industry. It's how do you bring in that external perspective, those external understandings of the things that are around us, and apply that to what's in front of us that has to be decided or solved.
Hmm.
And it could be anything. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in a business meeting with a CEO and the conversation of something like fast food comes up because there's a commercial, and the commercial brings some sort of real world reference to what we're talking about. And it's being able to connect those dots
Yeah.
and build that big picture and storytelling. And that's how that's at least the starting point of how you can start to come up with a good strategy. There's a lot more in there,
Right.
understanding perspectives, understanding customer perspectives and partner perspectives and consumer perspectives and user perspectives. There's design thinking that goes into that. How do you think from the outside in? There's a lot of other techniques, but I think the thing that everybody can do is really just leverage your own personal experiences into the conversation to help you formulate whatever that strategy is.
Yeah, I love that. And we talked a little about that once before, and I just found that so fascinating. It really stuck with me, especially for business owners and also for career changers, and how important it is that they bring kind of their whole selves into their transition, because they're often so reluctant to put things on their resume or to talk about things that aren't directly related with whatever to whatever they're looking at in terms of a new job. And that I was so interested in your perspective on that, because I share it, and I think it's really important to come in with these other interests and these other experiences and let people see them, and maybe help them connect the dots. But sometimes they'll come up with their own, interesting way to look at it as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the topics or one of the stories that we discussed when we had talked before was, let's take somebody who has fashion design experience and they want to get into a technology role. You might not see the correlation there, but there is so much technology being built right now around fashion design. We know that video game developers are looking for fashion inside of their video games, costumes, and gear that people are going to wear while they play the game. We see technology evolving in retail, where we're now seeing virtual try it on types of applications. I can stand in front of a mirror and actually try something on physically. Well, somebody who understands fashion and can bring that into the technology role can be successful. And so just because you might have some obscure interest or background or degree, you should always leverage that in some way, especially if you're looking for a career change or you're looking to migrate into some other realm. It's okay to share that experience because it's all ultimately relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think, I've been reading a lot. Great book by, I believe it's Ora Nadrich. I might be saying the first name wrong, but it's Mindfulness and Mysticism. And I didn't expect to actually enjoy this book, but I picked it up and I'm reading and I'm fascinated by it. And so much of it is about, kind of losing the illusions that we have and becoming, really becoming more ourselves. And to be able to be that in the world, in the work world, which is something that really is a huge shift. And I just find it freeing for people, and I find it, productive, I think, for businesses too, to allow some of that in. And I was actually listening to your podcast one day, that digital show, and I heard some really interesting things along those lines, and really kind of taking care of employees in that way and allowing them to actually have feelings at work and all kinds of things. I'd love for you to just speak about that for a minute, as companies too are trying to shift their cultures so that people want to work for them.
Yeah. It's challenging for a lot of smaller businesses and even medium-sized businesses because they want to hire employees, but then those employees are looking for these incredible working experiences and cultures. And then you get into this kind of catch-22, like, well, we can't hire anybody because we don't have the culture and no one wants to come work for us. The reality here is you've got to build that culture, and you have to take time and energy and make that happen, because that ultimately is going to lead to people wanting to work for you and people staying with you. And this goes across not just how do you treat your employees, but what you provide them. And we're not talking like free meals every day and all of the fantasies that we see at Google. We're talking about just legitimately spending time and listening and helping individuals become the best versions of themselves. You are your greatest asset. That's what we just started talking about. When we are hiring somebody, we want to hire you. We don't want to hire what you think we want to hire, and you make up a resume that's glowing and that's not really who you are. Be yourself. But on the inside, our internal needs are to help guide that, help nurture that, help grow that. And so we do that through a lot of different things: listening to what our customers want, having surveys that you send out to your entire team to get a feel of what's working and what's not working, your hiring process, and making sure that you are removing biases during your hiring process. And that's very challenging for a lot of organizations. But all of these different things are designed to help bring this really strong employee-centered culture into an organization so that they are successful. And we know that if the employees are successful and happy, they're going to work harder, they're going to produce more, and they're going to stay longer. Mm-hmm. And that tends to be the biggest challenges that companies have with keeping employees.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's so important to hear that there is a huge cost component to not doing that. I mean, as much as there's a cost component to doing it, there's, I think, a greater risk if you don't. At least I think that's what's being seen today. What are some of the things that you think maybe smaller companies could do that would work? I know money's not the only driver. It's not even one of the more significant ones when it comes to culture, I don't think.
Yeah, see, these are challenges for a lot of companies just in general. And I'll give you a great example of this. I was speaking with somebody who is in HR, and they were complaining that it was the end of the year and there were a set of employees that were expecting certain raises and promotions. And because it's the end of the year, you have to do that. And they were fearful that if they didn't provide that promotion, that they would probably lose that employee and they would go off to another job. Very common. I'll give you another one because it's also employment related, and that's in your hiring process. I can't tell you how many companies out there are hiring people because, oh, I know this individual, I trust this individual, I'm going to bring them in and hire them, right? Here's an example at Google. Google has everything very structured. There is a promotional period, there is a promotional guideline, and we do not deviate from it no matter what. There's a hiring guideline, and when I say removing the bias from your hiring, no one at Google can say, oh, I like this individual, we should hire them. We actually have a series of 4 or 5 interviews that are all by individuals that are not, very specifically, that are not associated with the role that we are hiring for. The hiring manager is not actually involved with the hiring process. Now, for a lot of companies who are sitting here listening, they're like, what? No, we could never do that. But why do we do this? When we allow other people within the organization to help with the hiring process and to ensure that the fit for that candidate matches the culture of the organization that we are trying to create, it brings in a better perspective. We get through all of those biases, and it's not about just hiring somebody for the sake of hiring somebody. Same thing with the promotions. Set promotion times, set promotion schedules, set promotion metrics. We don't deviate from that. So if an executive comes and says, we really need to give this promotion now or else this employee might leave, our response might be, then they leave. There is a set time when we give those out. And I can tell you, there's a lot of organizations. So this individual I was talking to in HR, point blank said, oh, we could never do that. Well, if you cannot do that, then you're going to constantly have these same types of problems. And that's what you have to start thinking about, because that costs nothing for you to do. That's just a policy that you have to implement and enforce. And that will drastically start to improve the culture of your organization.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And, you know, I find it fascinating to look at a situation like that where there is so much structure and things are really laid out and there are, you know, great sort of standard operating procedures for probably everything. And then you look at the more, you know, the smaller, more entrepreneurial ventures out there and you know, just kind of trying to bridge that gap from having almost nothing in place like that to try.
Yeah.
And I work with people who are, they're trying to get there, but the time involved in doing it and everything else becomes almost, overwhelming. But as when I'm listening to you, I'm realizing, it's so crucial. How would one sort of start on that process at least to kind of
Sure.
move toward it?
Yeah, well, let's take a startup. Let's say you're an entrepreneur and it's a company of one. Obviously, you're doing a lot of work, and at some point in time, you're going to hire somebody, and it may be your best friend, and that's okay. So now you've got a company of two. Let's just say, for the sake of the conversation, we have to hire employee number 3. Who is that employee going to report to? Employee 1 or 2? CEO or CFO? I don't know. If it's going to report to the CFO, have the CEO do the interview. If it's going to report to the CEO, have the CFO do the interview. And then you continue to expand to that. So now let's say you have a company of 5 and you're creating a new role that's going to report to the CEO. The CEO should say, okay, employee 4 and 3, you do the interview. And you have to give a lot of trust in that. You have to believe that the individuals you've already hired understand what your vision is, understand what your culture is going to look like, and you empower them to actually go and do that interview. But the longer that the CEO does all of the interviews, one, you're consuming all of your time for things that you should be doing other things with. And 2, you're beginning to build that culture from the start. And you can keep expanding that. You have 10 employees. If the role is in IT, pick marketing to do the interviews. Mm-hmm. If the role is in marketing, pick operations to do the interviews. Just have somebody do the interview that is outside of the organization that is hiring for that role. And it will start to really help, because your communication about your vision and operations and culture and all those things that we care about, that becomes a lot more crystal clear. And the people who are doing the interviewing are going to interview based on, is it a right fit into the culture? Yes, the job role is important, but typically, and to give you another example, Google example, we have 4 interviews, and one is skill set. Another one is what we call Googliness. And quite honestly, if you don't pass the Googliness interview, it doesn't matter how well you do at your own skill set, you probably won't get hired.
Interesting.
We're looking for individuals who will fit into the culture above and beyond what their skills are, because we can train skills. We can teach other areas of the company, but we can never tend to change that mindset and that culture and that personality that we're really looking for.
And how do you go about assessing that? That's super interesting.
Yeah, there's a whole scale. There's a rubric that we have created, and it says, for depending upon the level of the employee or the level of the role and what we are looking for, we have questions that have been defined. We have a rubric that has a clear definition of what we're looking for. That's across multiple levels. So say level 1 up to level 7. We have, again, everything is spec'd out. So if we go back to the same thing, not only are we having individuals outside of the organization do the interviewing process, but the questions are predefined. So the interview is not, I'm going to make up a bunch of questions and have a conversation with you to try to determine if I like you or not, or if you're a good fit. You have to go through and ask the questions, and then we judge and rate and grade based on the response to those questions. So having all of this kind of preset and predefined and determined can substantially help you in that whole interviewing and hiring process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. A lot of really great systematization that people need to implement to free themselves up too, and to get the job done properly, I think. Um, so, okay, I want to just jump into the kind of the more innovation piece of the conversation. I'm just very curious with all the innovating that people have to do right now. Kind of along similar lines, do you how do you put yourself in kind of that creative space of being able to innovate? I know, it for me anyway, it's hard for me to sit at my desk and like just say, okay, I need a new idea. Something else has to go on. I have to be somewhere else or be doing something else. What could people use to help them where they're stuck and they're thinking, I need a new idea, I need a new revenue stream, I need to change things? How?
Yeah, so the first thing that you have to understand is innovation can come from anywhere. Just like disruption can happen at any time and change can happen at any moment, innovation can happen anywhere. So if you have a small company with 10 employees, all 10 of those employees are your chief innovation officers. If you've got a company of 20, all 20, company of 100, company of 1,000, every single employee is a chief innovation officer. They need to be empowered to help you come up with ideas. And that's because, look, I've come up with a lot of wonderful ideas in my life, but I could never have possibly come up with every single possible idea. And so the more people that you have working on your behalf to come up with ideas, the better the company is. And it's not just your employees. The really successful companies capture that innovation outside of their company as well. So they're using, say, external customers or external developers and setting up technology in a way so that outside people can create new things and products and ideas for you on your behalf. And when you can then create this network or an ecosystem of innovators around the world, then you're really tapping into some creative potential. As for you and you yourself, we all have our own creative processes, whether that's through meditation or in the shower or driving in a car or taking a nap and thinking while you sleep. All of that is possible to create new ideas. The piece that is challenging for the organizations is to find ways of, one, empowering that everybody can create and submit ideas, and two, capturing those ideas and knowing how to act upon those ideas. And so if you can empower the employees to say, okay, every single person in this office is a chief innovation officer. And if you have an idea, here's how you can submit that idea. And here's the process that we go through to validate that idea or to work on the idea, then great. That's one way you can do it. The other way that you can do it is by giving people the opportunity to hone in on the idea or to build the idea. So another example at Google is we have what we call a 20% project. What that really means is that as an employee, you've got 100% of your time at the company. 80% of that time is dedicated to what your job is, what your role is, what we've hired you for. But we're going to give you another 20% of free time to learn, grow, or try something new. Or if you've got a great idea, go execute it and see if it works. Prove it out. And again, this is a scary idea for a lot of companies because they're like, well, we need people performing 110% of their time doing what we've hired them to do. Well, those companies tend to find that they don't have time for innovation. And so they get very stagnant. And occasionally somebody comes up with an idea and they go try and execute on it. or they have one person within the organization and it's their idea to come up with product ideas and that's all they do. And then they create a roadmap and then they try to execute on it. But when you actually empower those employees to have time invested in their days to think about ideas, to solve problems, to give you information about what they struggle with, that's where we see true innovation happening. And this doesn't have to be some magic in the bottle, lightning in the bottle, creative genius, a brilliant idea. There's one story about a steel company that opened up just nothing more than a suggestion box. And in 1 year, they received over 200,000 suggestions.
Wow.
And what's funny is actually one guy created about 50,000 of those suggestions in a single year. That's all he did. He was just sitting there creating crazy ideas. Out of that suggestion box, though, they were able to implement several of them and saved the company millions of dollars in processes and time.
Wow.
Just by having nothing more than a suggestion box. But the key was the box is there, anybody can submit an idea, and we have a process to look through them, analyze them, and execute on them. And it was successful because they saved millions of dollars in process cost.
Wow.
So
that's a great story. Yeah, really interesting and really so motivating as a company, I think, to just have that kind of idea generation and creativity going on. I mean, that just seems like an environment that would be very energizing to people. So, yeah, really, really fascinating. You have had, like I said before, an amazing career, and you've made a lot of changes yourself. What would you say to somebody really at any age? I mean, young people coming up, but also midlife people making a change. I don't know if you've had roadblocks along the way or any disappointments at all, but you know, you've definitely continued, it looks like, to grow and develop and do cool, wonderful new things.
appreciate that. Yeah, of course I've had roadblocks. I still have roadblocks. Even today, I'll have a roadblock. I, I think it's how you take it. You know, you can't take it personally. We have this saying at Google, and I'm sure others have heard it before: fail fast, learn how to fail fast. It's a common business theme. It's also learn how to recover fast. You know, failure is part of it. And there could be any number. And you've probably all have heard some random, you know, whether it's Einstein's patents or, you know, somebody's, an actor's number of submissions before they got hired, or, you know, there's any number of those types of stories that are out there. But those are all rooted in some foundation to think about, which is you're going to fail and you have to just brush it off and learn to get over it and move on. And that seems cold, but really it's inspiring. Mm-hmm. If you can just continue to focus on what's in front of you, and whether that's a goal or an objective or something you want to accomplish. I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm writing a novel. I'm writing a fantasy adventure novel. I've been working on this for almost 5 years. I've received multitudes of rejection letters from publishers and stuff. But it doesn't mean that I'm not stopping or that I'm stopping because of those rejections. It's just information. It's just data points for me to think about, well, they're probably right. Or I'm really confident in what I'm doing, so I'm going to continue on this path. You got to look at it as, you know, information to help you make those next decisions. But I would encourage everyone who's listening, if you've got a passion for something or an idea, pursue it. If you want to return to school and get a new degree, pursue it. If you want to change careers, pursue it. There's nothing preventing you from doing anything you want to do. You've just got to be willing to do it put in the work that's going to be required to do it, and navigate the disruptions along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And, as you're saying that, what is coming to mind is what I think the show touches on a lot, which is the voice in people's heads when they're hearing this is, well, I wish I could, but I don't have the money to stop working and start again. Um, would you have any sort of money mindset type of answer to that?
Yeah, look, we're all faced with our daily lives. What do we have in front of us? Whether that's rent or mortgage or child support bills or, anything else, student loans that people are going through, all of that is valid. And so, yes, you've got to be able to maintain what it is that you need to maintain. Can you take a hard look at some of that? Can I not go to McDonald's as much as I do? Maybe. But sometimes I really like McDonald's, or donuts is for me. So, you will have to make some hard decisions, and you will have to look at your finances in a way to say, I just can't do this. And maybe it's, I can't do this right now, but maybe it's, I can do this later. But also, this is where the strategy comes in, and thinking about the larger, bigger picture is begin mapping things out. And if you can say, like we said, you've got a degree in fashion design and you want to move to technology, that doesn't mean that you have to immediately go to school. That doesn't mean that you immediately have to create some sort of new profile and spend a lot of money to do it, or that you have to invest in some startup. There are many steps that you can take in that journey. And I think if you were to simply map those out and figure out what steps you can do today at no cost, for free, it's going to take you little to no effort, then start doing that. Mm-hmm. Because that's going to help build up your portfolio. A good example of this might be something like a podcast, mm-hmm. which is relatively no cost. I mean, there are obviously professional podcasts out there that are a lot of money to invest and produce. But imagine if you just started a small podcast just for yourself, talking about something you're passionate about, talking about something you want to get into. That becomes part of your portfolio in that journey that you're going to start to make. Or maybe you want to start writing blog posts. And there's lots of websites out there that are looking for guest blog post authors. So write something that you're passionate about and actually start getting it out there. Another example is taking your hobbies and trying to figure out how those hobbies can migrate into what you want to do. So I was talking with a real estate agent a couple of weeks ago, and they're like, I'm still trying to build my real estate business. There is some expenses that I have to worry about, but I can't really figure out a niche. And there's so many other people that are out there doing real estate. What do I do? And I said, well, what are your passions? What are the things that you like to do? And it came up that it was gardening. I said, how many homeowners out there need a gardener? Almost all of them. So start connecting and saying, hey, I'm going to write a blog post or something on gardening, and connect your real estate business to that. There's a connection for all of this, for everything.
Yeah.
And so when you just can't think A to B or A to Z, we'll say, and I just want to get to Z, and I want to spend all my money to get to Z. Go through the rest of the alphabet. Start at A, do B, C. Those are usually much smaller, much easier, and will have the same impact in the long run.
Thank you. I love that. I also love the idea of taking the steps, because you don't know where the steps will lead you. And when I did read the longer version of your bio, I was wondering, when you were, in your first successful, job and with the movie theaters and everything, did you anticipate, at all where you would be now?
No, no, uh, but what was interesting was if you actually dissect my career, there was elements of what I did from my very first job in what I do today.
Mm.
And if I think about a 30-year, it's probably 35-year career, to say that I can clearly map elements of every job I've had and how those elements ultimately have gotten me to where I am, and I'm still using those elements in my role today, that's what you're looking for. Because, yeah, my career took any number of turns and U-turns and crisscrosses and where in the world am I right now? But I constantly was able to leverage experiences and passions into a role that has obviously really materialized and matured over the last 5 years. So, same thing. Anybody who's 18 and selling popcorn at a movie theater right now, guarantee that that role will transpire into something really magical in another 30 years for you.
I love that. Thank you so much. I could talk to you all day. I promised you a stop about now, so I am going to respect your time. I was recently, I saw some post maybe on LinkedIn from Gary Vee talking about kindness being such an important aspect of business today, and more people should be kind in their businesses. And I want to thank you for your kindness in coming on and taking part of your day to be here. I really appreciate it. You're fascinating. There's so much more that people can learn from you. Can you tell people how they can find you and learn from you and listen to you?
Sure. Again, appreciate that. Yeah, I think kindness is definitely one of those things that not only makes the world go around, kind of cliche, but I think definitely helps businesses grow and prosper as well. So I totally agree with that. But yeah, if you want to learn more about me or get in touch with me, the best place to do that is reach out by my website or blog at chrishood.com. CHRISHOOD.com. And on there, you can find a lot of things that I've produced and all of my social media where you can reach out to me and connect with me. And if you want to email me, feel free to do so. Happy to talk to anybody.
Thank you so much. And I'll be looking for that novel. I think that's very exciting. I love all the different passions. I love the fact that you even use the word passion. It's a little bit taboo these days, it seems like, but I still believe it's important, however you define it. So,
Definitely.
yeah. Well, Chris, thank you again. Very much appreciate it. And I think people will learn a lot from you and from this show. And yeah, great information, great stories. Thank you.
Again, appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for listening, for all of your listeners.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, listeners. We love having you show up on the Money and You show. And please join us where anywhere podcasts are found. You'll find this one. Apparently, I can't talk anymore. And also on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. We will be streaming from ubngo.com every Monday night at 7. And I can't wait for you to hear this show because I really hope it'll open your mind, shift your perspective, and allow you to be more innovative and more strategic going into 2022. Don't forget to give yourself time for that. Don't just jump into the work. Step away and make sure that you take some time to create the vision and the strategies that you're going to need to be successful in 2022. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.